Welcome to Street Talk. I feel like it's been a long time since we've all seen each other. I know my partner in crime, so to speak, Father Russ, is still out in New London working with his crew of people of the brain injury ilk out there. And we're continuing to do shows. Obviously, we have some great interest going on over the next few months, working our way up to the municipal elections. And as I'm sure some of you may know or may not know, I'm actually going to be running for alderman in Milford in the 5th District. So I will be out and knocking doors. I'm not necessarily going to be asking for money, thank God. But we do have quite a few people who are in exploratory campaigns. I know we've had Dan Drew on, who's changed over from actually doing an exploratory to he's officially in for governor. But we have a lot of other people that are going around, and they're part of what I call the constitutional officers, which are treasurer, I don't think anybody's looking for comptroller yet, and secretary of state. So seeing as budgets and pensions are all on everybody's minds, we thought that this would be a really good opportunity to be able to have somebody who's running for treasurer to come on and hopefully be able to explain some of this, as it has a direct effect on what's going on up at the State House and our long-term budgetary considerations that are going to go on within the future. So, without ado, I have John Blankley on. He's running for treasurer, which is statewide, and you're in the exploratory phase of the campaign, which I know we were discussing before. I guess in order to get the matching funds, you have to be able to get small increments. But when you're in the exploratory phase, obviously you're getting your name out there and you're building the infrastructure. So your campaign's going to be going on for probably well over the next year.
Indeed.
But we look forward to you. And now I met John at our Democratic Town Committee meeting in Milford, and just the sensibility of the things that you were discussing made me think this is somebody that actually knows what he's talking about, which is good for somebody who's going to be a state treasurer. But I wanted to give you a little opportunity to be able to, I guess, talk about yourself. I know they'll probably figure out you're British in a second, so we'll
From the very first word out of my mouth,
yes,
yes,
yes.
It cannot be hidden. But Dominic, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity. And it was enjoyable meeting you for the first time at the Milford DTC. And in fact, you're quite right. The reason I was there is that when you run for a statewide office, if you're not known statewide, you need to get out there and introduce yourself to the party. Mm-hmm. And that means going from town to town and municipality to municipality and city to city, talking about yourself, saying why you're doing what you're doing. So that is a major part of the exercise. But you allude also to the money and what happens when you're in an exploratory phase, and that is why almost every candidate says that he's exploring. That is, every candidate who is trying to qualify for the state grant under the clean election laws, which is to say, if you get the qualifying money, and I'll talk about that in a second, then you qualify for a state grant, which in my particular case, over $500,000. Sounds like a lot of money, but in fact, to run a statewide campaign, you need that amount of money. But to qualify for it, you need to raise $75,000 in increments of no more than 100. But that is not actually enough to run a campaign before the moment when you qualify. So that's why you explore, and that means you can take in $375 from any individual. And so that's what I'm about. I dial for dollars, either $375 or hundreds. In fact, any amount, frankly, between $5 and $375.
And it's, well, I mean, it's also a gauge of how the populace feels.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
if you're able to fundraise and you're able to people
Yes.
are donating to you,
Yes.
then you know you have a good level of support.
Absolutely. So the purpose is to gain that support, tell people what you're doing, and indeed, if they're prepared to back that with money, then that is a good sign. And that is, of course, how you qualify. That is how the state set it up. They say if you can't raise that amount of money, then clearly you don't have the backing for what you're trying to do. So there'd be no point in giving anyone.
Oh, take
the
my
money.
word. I'm very appreciative of clean elections. God knows I would love it if they got rid of Citizens United. I think there's so much that's gone evilly wrong in the way that one or two people can finance
Yes.
somebody's campaign. Obviously,
Yes.
we're not talking state of Connecticut. We're talking on the federal level. But I think we all wish it would go back to the old days.
If you need, getting on for $2 billion in order to run a real presidential campaign, that is a lot of money. And so the money that has come into our politics is something that I've noticed in the 35 years that we've been here. It has become a very bad influence, I think, on our politics and our policies. So we do not end up with the best somehow.
That I would agree with. And obviously, we can get on to our talking about our president and a little bit and some of the other issues that are going on, obviously today. But you are from a very affluent area of the state, as they say, where you're from the Gold Coast end of things. And I'm always surprised to tell people that they're actually Democrats down in Greenwich.
There are a few of us. In fact, there's more than a few of us. We have over 9,000 registered Democrats now. There's 12,500 registered Republicans and 13,000 registered unaffiliated. But the 9+ Democrats has been growing steadily over the years. So generally speaking, when people register, it is either unaffiliated or Democrat in those proportions. Yeah.
And as they say, this isn't your first time out running. This
No.
is you've run for several other.
I became involved in politics about 10 years ago. I got onto the RTM, the Representative Town Meeting in Greenwich. I ran for first selectman in 2011 and lost against the Republican incumbent. I ran for the State Assembly in 2012 and lost there again also against the Republican incumbent, and ran for the State Senate last year and again lost against the incumbent. But I moved the needle. I'm rather proud of that, as a matter of fact. We normally get 30% of the vote. I managed to move it to 40%. And the 36th district where I ran is all of Greenwich, half of Stamford and half of New Canaan. So to get those particular areas which are heavily Republican and to move the needle somewhat, I'm
They are, as I'd like to say, I mean, that was the district federally that Chris Shays held on to for quite a long time.
Well, he was a congressman, yes, which encompassed that and other parts.
But certainly
yes.
well known down in that area.
Yes.
Of,
But you allude
state.
to, the affluence of Greenwich. I want to tell you, I feel very privileged in my life to get to that particular place because we started from nothing. My father was a coal miner in the north of England, and I was fortunate enough to have a good education. I got to Oxford University and I went to Price Waterhouse in the City of London, qualified as a chartered accountant, and eventually joined BP, and it was BP who brought me to America as Chief Financial Officer of Operations here, and that's when we bought our place in Greenwich, and we've been there ever since, and we've been very happy, not just in Greenwich, we've been very happy in Connecticut. We love Greenwich, we love Connecticut, and we love America.
Well, I think with anything, you've earned your opportunity. And that's the great part about this country is I'm an immigrant too. I actually just became a U.S. citizen just a couple of years ago, and only got involved in politics out of necessity. And I think that's for some people it's altruistic. They want to go out. They want to change the world. I guess I wanted to change the world, but my view was always sort of one person at a time, or being able to influence the nonprofit sector of the world. I think it was only after, I guess, I realized that if you don't take the opportunity to speak out, you a lot of times you're protecting what has been there from losing it, rather than trying to build something more when you're talking about some of the issues within the state.
I think the motivation is to make the world a better place. And it seems to me it's the obligation of people who have been, frankly, well educated and well schooled, who have skills and experience to feed that back and plow that back into society. Using that word society reminds me, when we came here, we came from the UK, and I don't know which year you came. We came in '83.
I was 1976. Believe it or not, I actually came to watch the bicentennial of
so
the country.
you just missed. Oh, interesting. You just missed Margaret Thatcher. Anyway, she was Prime Minister at the time.
I know Margaret Thatcher.
And coming back to this word society, it seemed to be one of the worst things she ever said was that there is no such thing as society. And what she meant by that was that we are, each of us, somehow a little automaton, a little economic unit, rather like Ayn Rand, the Ayn Rand philosophy. And that is absolutely anathema to me. That is not what we are. We are a community of people. And if you prosper in that community, as we have, frankly, since we've been in America, it is your absolute duty to give back to that society. So that is the primary motivation for me.
And I think that's I guess part of the outward philosophy that I know was certainly there from some of the barons, and I know you're a big history person that created the railroads and other things, and when they got to the later on part of their life, they had so much riches that they gave back to certain institutions or giving to society. And I think that's going on now with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett.
But it comes from a previous generation. I am half Scottish as well as half English. In fact, I should say, I'm very fond of saying I'm 50% English, 50% Scottish, and 100% American. But the Scottish part of me is to the fore in that I'm a member of the St. Andrew's Society of the State of New York. We believe the oldest charity in the United States, and I sit on the finance board there looking after the endowment. But one of our presidents from decades ago was Andrew Carnegie. And to the point about giving back, he did exactly that with his fortune. You think of libraries and institutions all across the country which came from his endowment. And my son went to Carnegie Mellon University, as a matter of fact.
I was just going to say Carnegie Mellon.
And we're currently in the process of fundraising in the society, and we are calling those who give most of the society members of the Carnegie Circle. So that philosophy is alive and well and strong.
And obviously, this is what you're looking to do and run for office, and is to be able to utilize the skills that you have, and you have a very unique skill set. Well, you can say what you want. You worked for companies and dealt with budgets that are bigger than what our state government runs.
Indeed. Yeah. That is an amazing thing about our capitalist world, that some of the largest companies have budgets greater than many countries and greater than some of our states, including our own state of Connecticut. But just getting onto the Treasury for a second, the main functions are an actual Treasury operation, money in, money out, 3 million transactions in a year, bond issuance, over $1 billion of bonds to be issued in this most recent cycle, and management of the pension funds. And all of those are jobs which I've had and activities that I've had and skills that I've acquired in my corporate life. I also set up my own company 18 years ago with two partners in Connecticut, which has been successful. So I know about small business creation. I know about the needs of people seeking employment. But as far as the Treasury is concerned, those big activities are all skills and experience that I've acquired over the years, and I feel I can bring some of that to Hartford. We have a financial, people use the word crisis. I think it's rather too strong a word, but we have severe financial problems, and I have a financial background, and I want to go to Hartford to see what I can do to help alleviate it. But let's be very clear about what the Treasurer does. The Treasurer is not responsible for the budget per se. That is the purview.
You're not policy.
I'm not policy in that sense.
Is what that is.
However, so if there's a problem that wide that we have, what the Treasurer does is look after that part of it. But that part of it does need to be looked after as well.
I'm sorry, just a technical issue. You still got the microphone on here. I hope it's not. There you go. So I didn't want to make sure it was echoing on me.
Okay.
It got quiet all of a second. Certainly, I know what we're looking at is pensions and fixed costs within our system are a major issue. And I know the way that things have been funded pension-wise in the past is they had what you call like a pay-as-you-go system. And they haven't given the upfront capital.
That's right.
To be able to have somebody like you come in and manage and grow at the point that people were still working within the system, so that when they retired, there's monies to be able to utilize to reinvest, get interest from. So I know I looked at the state treasurer's website, and I looked at some of the different pension plans, and I know it's a major issue as to who's going to fund some of these that are a large part of the discussion. But there's some very huge pension funds having to do, obviously, with different municipalities. You would be responsible for their pension funds. Obviously, state employees, judges. I didn't realize there were several. There are about 9 separate.
Oh yes.
Pension funds.
Yes, there's the 2 major ones for
Right.
the employees and teachers, but then there are others, and then there's Chet, which is $2.5 billion.
Yes. Well, Chet is close to my heart.
Okay, good.
Because I have obviously I have a 7-year-old son, and I contribute to Chet because I think it's obviously I believe it's a good vehicle.
Yes. Those tax-advantaged investment opportunities are certainly things that should be encouraged. But coming back to the main problem, the budget problem and how to close the budget gap and all of that is the governor and the legislature. What happened to the pension fund over time is that we boiled a frog. Yep. We just slowly but surely over time kept turning the temperature up, and all of a sudden we're the frog and we can't get out, to change the analogy. So we have assets of $32 billion in our pension funds right now, which sounds like a lot of money, and it is. $32 billion. The problem is that we need north of $60 billion, and we can't get from $32 billion to north of $60 billion overnight. It will take a very long time in terms of very superior rates of return on those pension fund assets to get anywhere near the liabilities that we've incurred. I mean, we've incurred those liabilities over time. When the pension funds were set up, they weren't funded, as you say, and then slowly but surely over time a gap started to build, and it got wider and wider, and the money was not put in. And then when it came time sometimes to put money in via the term is the ARC, the actuarially required contribution, where actuaries work out each year how much the state should put in from the state budget. Sometimes the ARC was not funded. It was not mandated by the state. So there again we started to fall behind. And then we had things like the crisis of 2008-9, and we fell behind there. So we are in a situation where we have to do a lot of catch-up.
And the problem is it's not just capital that's resting out there. It's monies that also have to be given to people who are retiring or
Post-employment
have been
benefits.
on retirements. And so, I mean, I think I looked, they were talking about the fund was like plus like maybe 0.6% or 1.6%, somewhere in between there. Which is good it was in the positive,
Yeah.
but that's, you can see the liabilities as far as what they have to pay out versus what's getting added to the capital.
We have post-employment benefits. So right now, for example, just a small example, in Greenwich we have our pension fund, but we have also funded post-employment benefits. So there are two funds managed separately by different people. I sit on the finance board in Greenwich, and I'm part of the investment advisory committee that oversees these activities. And it's our pension fund is underfunded, and our post-employment benefits fund is underfunded. But we have the ARC, and we make those contributions every year to these funds. So but even in Greenwich we have an unfunded liability. Imagine that. And then writ large at the state level, we have this monster that we need to tackle. It is a source of instability, and it is one reason that corporations, like the large corporations I used to work for, have been saying, you know what, this is an uncertainty that in the corporate world we don't like. And that's one reason, but only one reason, why companies or headquarters anyway, I shouldn't say companies, headquarters of companies like GE and Aetna have moved out. So introducing stability and certainty is part of what I would hope to do by going to Hartford, because I know from my corporate background that is what corporate executives want. They want to see that there is a plan, at least, for dealing with the situation.
And not running from crisis to
And not
crisis.
running from it, no. And if I may say, and not running from the state. If there's one thing that I frankly disapprove of, it's people who say, you know what, we're going to move out of state. It is their absolute right and ability to do so, but I take a contrary view. I say, if you've lived in Connecticut all these years, it's been good to you, stay with it. It may have been mismanaged over time, but let's forget that. Let's now get into the business of managing it properly.
I know I've been here going on 41 years. I mean, this is the place where I chose to raise my family. I have a young son. Obviously, if we can get a hold of some of these things, and that gives people more opportunities for employment, and as you say, the larger companies have moved some of their headquarters, and some of the headquarters moving had nothing to do with our total economics. I know sometimes that gets a lot of cover from that, because I mean, you talk about a GE and wanting to be able to get a certain type of talent that they feel is more Boston or New York. I mean,
you're right. Those are the real reasons.
Yeah.
GE came out of the big city in the 70s because the big city was dangerous. It came to a leafy suburb in Connecticut, a nice campus there in Fairfield. Brilliant move. But after all these years, they said, you know what is the world going forward? The world going forward is a digital, tech, talented world. And where do you find those clusters of people in the academy, in business, in research centers, all together in one place that produces a symbiosis that you don't find in your nice corporate headquarters in Fairfield? And the place was clearly Boston. Could be Shenzhen in China, I mean, or it could have been New York, but ultimately they chose Boston. And that, I think, was the real motivation. If they could get tax breaks on top, which they did, which people up there are not happy about, incidentally, then so much the better. But, you know, for a $130 billion corporation to get $120 million of a tax break, yeah, okay, but it's not meaningful in the large corporate balance sheet.
Well, and in the bigger picture, I know, speaking in GE, a lot of their financial industry moved to Norwalk. I think it got renamed, and a lot of those jobs are still within it. Connecticut.
And similarly in Stamford, consumer finance unit is now a public company called Synchrony. And when it was broken off from GE, there were 250 employees. There are now 750 employees. There's actually a success story there that is hidden when you hear the big headlines, which get exploited for political reasons inevitably. But you know, that's politics.
It's the way the ball bounces. Well, and you know, to his credit, speaking of pensions, Dan Malloy
he's funded the ARC.
Funded it.
Yes.
He has funded it, and whereas others could have easily said, okay, well, you know, we're going to erase our deficit that we have here by not funding this. He has gone ahead and he's funded this, and I know, Dan, for some of the stuff that I might beat you up on, you do a lot of things that I think are responsible and have certainly moved us in the right direction. Some of the other things I think are more difficult to get through and to get done, and I know the recent union deal for pension benefits and other things is another complexity that you know, I guess it somewhat bothers me because I know on the other side of the aisle they're very much saying, well, we could have gotten a better deal done. But you know what? It is collective bargaining. That's the way that our state's set up. And in order to get them to go back and do something, you gotta reasonably give something in order to get some, especially when you're talking about give bags or
I think on that point, collective bargaining is an extremely important component of how our capitalist system works. Labor needs to be represented and represented properly. And from where I come from in England, you know, the union was always a strong force for the good. And I think it is certainly the case here too with this particular negotiation. It's always possible in any negotiation for someone who wasn't in the thick of it to say, oh, I could have done better. Well, you know what? You weren't there. And guess what? The outcome of this particular negotiation is that essentially 2% of the workforce in Connecticut has made a contribution that accounts for 30% of the deficit that we're facing. So I think they've stepped up, and I think they should be applauded for that, as opposed to, you know, being denigrated from the other side politically for not having contributed or not made a good deal or whatever.
Well, I actually listened to the whole debate on the Senate side, and I listened to Kathy Ostin, who we know Kathy very well, and she gave a whole history of the labor negotiations that had gone, and how, you know, we formed the state employees unions, and how pension benefits and other things. And I think back to you know, my father. When you came to this country, he was fortunate enough that they had good HR people, because he was ready to quit ITT at one point in time, and he was probably about a good maybe like 6 months or so away from
qualifying for his pension.
And he was ready to, you know, slap down his letter of resignation because they weren't going in the right direction. And somebody from HR stopped him and said, well, no, you might want to wait like a little while to do that. Thank goodness. But the level of benefits that were going on back in the 70s, you know, or early 80s, over time, that's changed throughout corporate America, and they're not offering those levels. And I think a lot of times people look at that and they say, why are these people getting something that I'm not getting? And it's almost like how do you deal with like the shrinking pie? Is you have to grow the pie. You can't, and that's some of what benefits from unions help to do is they carry that level of hopefully raising the tide or giving an example.
Yes.
Out there. But I mean that's also part of what I look at government of doing is, there's a certain amount of regulation that has to be out there. Capitalism in itself does not function without regulation.
Did you know that this is one of the things I talk about? I'm very fond of saying, when I formed my company here in Connecticut, I said when I ran for the state senate last year to my opponent, who inevitably, like all Republicans, says, if we just reduce regulation and reduce taxes, the entrepreneurial spirit would take off. So I said, name one regulation which, if removed, would have made me more entrepreneurial or more successful, and there is no such thing. We have to comply with regulations, for example, HIPAA.
Sure.
We do a lot of work with the healthcare sector, with hospitals in Connecticut, and if you don't have privacy of medical information, that is something that we all want. That is a good regulation, and most regulations are good regulations. So I'm fond of saying capitalism is a good system. It's made us all as wealthy and prosperous as we are, but there's actually one thing better, and people look back and say, what could be better than capitalism? The answer is regulated capitalism. It works. Otherwise we have, Love Canal, for example. What a terrible thing that was under old Continental Oil. That makes me actually, if I could just say, that brings me back to something that I've wanted to say, and that is, in the time that I've been in America, the change that I've noticed in terms of the politics on the other side of the aisle is quite extraordinary. When we came here, Ronald Reagan raised taxes. And people now say, what? Yes, he raised taxes. He lowered them, and then he discovered that he was creating a deficit. So he said, oh my God, we better raise taxes again. Yeah, a modern Republican president or party could not possibly do that.
No,
it was the right, they certainly have. And 10 years before that, another Republican president introduced the Environmental Protection Act.
Nixon.
Very needed. Nixon, of all people. Who knew? And where has that party gone now? To withdrawing from the Paris Accords?
He needed clean water for his mixers.
The real motivation.
Well, it is true. It is true, and I do. I that's part of my own philosophy. Is I think you have to have a certain amount of regulation.
Yes.
Because you know what, people will hold to a standard that you give them. But if you don't set a standard,
yes,
then how are they going to know that that's the level that they have to go towards to be able to
Good people
keep us
do
safe?
better than that. I'm proud to say I worked for a chemical company in the 90s when I did the biggest high yield bond deal that had ever been done at that time. I talked about bond issuance before as far as the state treasury is concerned. I have a background in bond issuance. And I'm proud to say this company, the chief executive, was a Republican, a hardline Republican actually. When we sat down to board meetings, the first item on the agenda was OSHA and what was happening with environmental issues and safety issues in the company. And he wanted us to exceed all the standards that were put out there. And good man, good philosophy. That is something which can and should transcend party political affiliation, and in that particular case did.
I think politics now, in some ways, has turned into a philosophical discussion with certain ideas that are stuck to people. And I know part of what I've enjoyed going up to the Capitol and dealing with is I found for the issues that I'm involved with, I get a lot of support from both sides, and
Good.
it's very comforting. A lot of the people in the state, and I know many of them very personally, and I've lobbied them and had long discussions with them. I think when you come to a core set of issues, the reality is that our legislature, 90% of the time they vote with each other, and they're usually hand in hand on
Yes.
a lot of the issues.
Yes.
But it's that 10% that really
causes the problem. I know.
defines,
Yes.
because it's to a certain degree, it's having to do with budgets, and it's having to do with the philosophy, and then the other parts of it are always positioning. I mean, where I look at a lot of the reason why we don't have a budget right at the moment. And I've had the former Speaker of the House, James Amon, on. He's from Milford, and he's a good friend of ours. And he'd explain it. He's like, when you have a large caucus, you can say people who don't necessarily agree with the whole situation. You can tell them, okay, well, maybe you want to go take a walk on this one, or. But when the numbers are so close,
Yes. Much more difficult.
yeah, you have to make some of those decisions, and all of a sudden, I know 3 senators held up the CBAC agreement.
Yes.
I don't know whether it was necessarily held up. They wanted to really go through it line by line. And I know my Senator Gail Schlossberg, she's one of those people that will pick something apart and take her time to go through it and really understand it. She calls herself a policy wonk, and I think that's good.
I think that's very good.
I think people should do that,
Yes.
those things, and
Yes.
I think there are some responsible levels of
Yes.
things that need to be put into place. I got a lot of friends that benefit from the retirement. They've been in state police, corrections. They did their 20 years. But I also know how much money it takes to be able to fund
Yes.
that. I mean, it's because I got a breakdown of it because I had to go figure something out for Department of Social Services, and normally, I guess, between benefits, pension, and everything else, you have to figure 1.5 times somebody's salary. But if you're in state police or something else along those lines, it's 1 3/4 for those people. And some stuff I agree with, some stuff I disagree with. I don't think that they should really be able to add in their overtime.
The famous overtime
Yeah,
question. Yes.
that everybody jumbles on to get 3 years worth of their best salary, and then they walk away with these crazy amounts of money. And I think on the other end, some of the high end folks, obviously that's not within your purview as far as treasurer, but I mean these are some of the issues that on the Republican side, you should be looking at this. And I know
I wonder if people on our side
Yeah.
who agree with that, as do I. It should be looked at. I mean, this is the kind of thing that would not go on in corporate America, and should not go on in a municipal setting or in a state government setting. I think lots of people agree on that particular point.
yeah, I do too.
Yes.
I do too.
So.
So I'm hoping you can explain some of these complicated financial things that I hear get thrown around from time to time. Bond premiums.
Okay.
What
Yes.
exactly are bond premiums?
Well, you can if you can issue a bond at $100 and it may have a coupon of say 4%, let's say, but you can also issue it at a lower amount. But you're still paying, the 4% on the full amount, and so there's a difference between these two amounts. And the way the accounting goes is that should be an amount that is written off over time, over the length of the bond, whether it's 10 years or 20 years or whatever. And unfortunately, some of the accounting that has gone on is that has been taken as income in the first year. So it's yes, it's creative accounting is what it is. And accounting, by the way, is an art, not a science.
I do understand.
And there are not necessarily hard and fast rules about things that can be done. So yes, there's a certain amount of playing fast and loose with that kind of accounting. Not good. There are other aspects of bond issuance, though, that I think are up for debate. The idea of carving out some portion of our total revenues and having bonds issued that are backed by this carved out portion of state income, with the objective of getting a super rating, a AAA rating for that particular bond. That's an idea that has been put forward. It reduces the interest cost, because with a superior rating you don't have to pay as much interest, obviously. The problem with that is, how much of these carve-outs do you do before you're running into a problem with the rest of the funds? So there are ideas like that float around, which I think are worth looking at, but in that particular case I would reject. I think let's look at the total revenues. Let's not carve out particular parts of it.
And GAAP? General accounting principles?
Generally accepted accounting principles, yes. I mean, and generally accepted. Yes, this was one of the things that Dan said when he came into office, that he felt there had been too much fast and loose with the accounting principles that had been applied. And one of the results of his saying, let us conform properly to what we should be doing, was that that revealed that the deficit was actually larger than had been thought. So when he first came into office, when he looked at the books, he had a $3.5 billion deficit coming into office. And his solution at the time was to say, let's split it half and half. Taxpayers, you do half, and unions, you do the other half. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough over time to keep us in the black. So I don't know whether you consider that to be a good or bad aspect of GAAP, but GAAP is it is very appropriate that we should have accounting principles and that they should be adhered to. I speak as a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, and it is one of the things you live by, along with the most other important thing you live by, which is when you go to the City of London, you're taught right at the beginning that your word is your bond. Very important aspect of trust in terms of dealing with other people, but I would say in terms of public trust as well. Let's put it this way: you'd rather do a deal on a handshake with someone you trust than do a cast iron clad deal with someone you don't trust.
Cast iron clad deals are never cast iron.
Well,
there's always a way.
That's why the level of trust and probity is so important in dealing with finance and dealing with accounting principles.
What were some of the other ones that I had in my head?
Oh, you're right.
Well, I mean, I like to think of it as I don't think about these things a lot up until a number of years ago. Up until we hit the financial crisis, I think we went through regular economic cycles, and I like I said, I give Dan credit. I know where he was going initially. I think he thought, as did everybody else think, that we were going to go into a sort of V recession. Because that's the way it's happened in the past.
Yes.
It did.
Yes. The United States is an amazing economic machine. I am a long-term bull as far as the outlook for America is concerned, but generally and particularly with regard to economics. As far as state budgets are concerned, if we're relying on the income tax, as we are to a large degree, that is unfortunate, because the income tax is a notoriously volatile source of revenue. It's a pity that we have that. But we have it, so we have to live with it. and find other sources of revenue, perhaps.
And I think that's truly the complexity that's really facing people. If I looked at the budgets that have gone on for the last 4 or 5 cycles, we're in and around that 18 to 20 billion dollars a year of spending.
Yes.
And that's remains sort of relatively flat within that. It's just we have all these other things that are eating into it and pushing away.
Yes. And then the problem on the revenue side, and as our political opponents will say, if we reduce the tax base as a result of people leaving, then that makes it all the more difficult. So we're in a bit of a fix there. But I mean that's where I say, guys, stay with it. Let us do something about it. Don't run away from it. Let's go to Hartford and solve the problems.
Obviously, you're committed to being here as I am. None of us are running off for a different state. I can't really think of another one that I'd like to move to personally, and certainly that's why I'm running for office.
Excellent.
Quite obviously, it's long-standing within your decision to do that.
Yes.
And you have the experience for the kind of work and the job, and I know you're not going to be the direct money manager, but you supervise the people that are managing the different funds.
That's right. I mean, this is not a case of the treasurer waking up one morning and saying, I think discretionary consumer spending stocks are where we ought to be today. It's just not like that. It is managing money managers. It is and selecting them and making sure that you got the best. It's allocation, determining how much goes into equity, how much goes into foreign equity, how much into small cap, how much into real estate, how much into alternatives, private equity, and so on, and how much goes into fixed income and how much needs to be kept in cash. That is what the role of the treasurer is, as far as the pension fund is concerned anyway.
I know I did it for a period of time. I did it for myself, and I had different ideas on how I allocate. I do my own IRA. Not the IRA.
Your 401k. Okay.
Through the company that I own.
Yes.
I finally got around to the point that I realized that I can't really do it myself anymore, and have somebody else that's reasonable to do it. But I watch what they're doing within that, and like you said, it's you're managing a team, and you're setting the policy, and understanding where things are going within that. Now, there's also, I guess, endowments that are part of what you're responsible for different other things. So it's not just the pension funds.
Exactly. As you said, there's 8 or 9 of those separate little entities. I think there are things that need to be done in terms of management. So you say yes, so the treasurer determines what these allocations are. Yes and no. I mean, my style of management is to seek input from everyone. Everyone should have a voice in this. I mean, clearly the leader of any operation will have the final say, but it's very important that people should feel engaged in the activity that they're in. And that's a managerial style that I would bring to the situation.
And I know that I've seen this over other states that have they use a certain amount of social input into because they're such large contributors into some of the direction that some of these corporations go within. I certainly think that's.
Well, that's a very interesting topic. The fact of the matter is, studies do actually show that socially responsible investing can actually be at least as good and sometimes better in terms of returns than any other kind. So I think it's a very important component of how funds get invested. There is the so-called UN Principles of Responsible Investing, which I believe that the state adheres to, and that is a good thing, and that should certainly be continued. And that takes account of what companies do in terms of their social policy, their internal governance policy, their directorial governance, what they think about in terms of the environment and everything else. Are they good corporate citizens? And I think those are the kinds of enterprises which actually give better returns in the long run, and which investors and pension fund investors should be looking for.
Which also, obviously, for the actions that they're taking,
Yes.
are good for our state,
Yes.
and the
Oh,
direction that has a larger influence.
Absolutely. There are some big things that could potentially be done. If you look at the range of pension funds across the world, the most successful is actually the Ontario Employees Pension Fund. One of the biggest in the world, 350 billion. They manage it entirely differently from the way that we manage ours. They actually have internal groups of people who invest and invest in private equity, for example, and have been very successful at doing it.
So I know we're down
right.
to the last.
The last 5 minutes, all right.
I always like to say I'm running for office. You're running for office.
Uh-huh.
You could always, as I say, you face the public and you give your
Yes.
your good 2-3 minute speech of here I am and this is why I'm doing it.
Yes.
Not that this hasn't been the whole show, but
Yes.
I leave that to you. Go ahead.
My pitch when I go to town committees, well, first of all, I talk about being an immigrant. And people want to know about it. They say, where does this voice come from? Well, I've been here 35 years. I can't get rid of it. But I'm an immigrant and a proud American, and becoming an American is a very big thing. And I, as far as the immigrant experience is concerned, if there's one thing that frosts me mightily, it is the attitude that our federal government now takes to immigrants. The plight of the poor lady who had to seek sanctuary in a church when she had 4 kids born in America. I mean, that is the kind of thing that is wrong, just wrong. I had great difficulty becoming an American citizen. I had to throw a lot of dollars at the doyen of the immigration bar in New York, the same man who incidentally got John Lennon into the country. So he has a lot to answer for. He got John Lennon and me, but he was a very compassionate man, and he was aware of the things that employers sometimes did with immigrant employees, undocumented, and when they discovered that they were undocumented, the bad things they did to those people. So that's something I talk about. But then I talk about the Treasury operations that I did before. I talk about my corporate background and the things I intend to do and my motivation for going there. It is that I have these financial skills and experience. We have financial problems in the state. I want to go and help and serve and do the best I can. That's one motivation. The other motivation occurred in the election last year. A total aberration as far as our national politics are concerned, and it seems to me that it is the duty of every person who can to stand up and speak against what is wrong. And when this president speaks against minorities, the LGBTQ community, against immigrants, it outrages me. So I was in a rally yesterday, for example, a vigil for the victims of Charlottesville. Our senior senator, Dick Blumenthal, came to speak and did a wonderful speech on the hatred that spews forth from some of those people and how we have to stand against it. So, those are some of the things I talk about. It gets beyond Treasury. It gets to being a good citizen, which is what I
always like to think of it as, I have a mission.
Yes.
And it encompasses a lot of things, but it is about giving people equal dignity. And when I look at somebody, whether they're disabled, whether they're black, whether they're white, whether they're a Republican politician or a Democratic politician, you know what? We all want the same things. We
Well
want to
said.
be able to thrive. We
Yes.
want to make sure our families grow up in a safe environment and have opportunities. And you know, dividing everybody up is not
Is not
going
the
to
way to
get
do it.
us
I know.
all to that place. And if some people feel disenfranchised, you know, within the system, you know, then it's our opportunity to be able to reach out and figure out a way to be able to help them
Yes.
to
Yes.
bring them along.
Yes.
And, I know that's my parting words, obviously, here, because I'm down to the last few seconds. So
It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's
sounds
the goal.
wonderful to me. Thank you very much for coming on.
Dominic, thank
John.
you.
I really appreciated you having on here.
Thank you.
And we can run the street.